good afternoon, and welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Headley Headspaces, where this week I am in conversation with Professor Corinne Fowler. Professor Fowler, welcome to the space. Thank you so much for joining.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. Professor Fowler has actually graced our space on several occasions, and she has come to my Twitter spaces, I think on 3 separate occasions. And she's also very much interested in questions around colonialism, and she has written some books. Professor Fowler, can you tell us about your latest literary works and also where people can find you on your socials?
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, so my most recent book is called Our Island Stories, which is a book of country walks through colonial Britain. So looking at the colonial history of the countryside in England, Wales, and Scotland. That you can get that book anywhere. And then I've got another recent book, which is a book of commissioned writing, creative writing, about 10 National Trust properties. And that book's called Colonial Countryside, and it's published by People Tree Press.
Is that more recent, that one?
Yeah, that's relatively recent. It's been a long time in the making, but it's where we had a group of historians and a group of writers, and the writers worked with the historians to produce creative responses to the history of very different history of 10 different National Trust properties. We've also got photographs in there by the photographer Ingrid Pollard, who was one of the Turner Shortlisted Prize photographers, artists.
Well, the last time I spoke to you in my Twitter space, you had done Our Island Stories and you were talking about that. So this is a more recent piece of work in and around the National Trust. And I know I recently read, did you also tell people that you're available on Substack?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Please follow me on Substack because I'm Billy No Mates at the moment. I've got other social. You can find me on. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. Yeah, because I've only just started, so I need to build up some, more followers. And I am on Blue Sky. I'm Corinne Fowler on Blue Sky. I am nominally on X, but most people have moved over to Blue Sky or other platforms. And you can find me at Prof Corinne Fowler on Instagram.
Could you also tell the audience and those people who are not familiar with you what you're a professor of?
Yeah, so I'm now an honorary professor actually because
Oh,
I
well
took
done. Let me see
voluntary
if I can give you some
redundancy.
emojis. Yeah, keep going, girl. I'm looking for him.
Yeah, I for a long time I was Professor of Colonialism and Heritage at the University of Leicester, but I took voluntary redundancy to be a freelance author, curator, and just to do more projects, change making projects. So I'm an honorary professor now, and yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, I want to dive straight into your latest publication on your Substack, given that we need to drive more traffic there. And also, anyone who's listening, please do jump all over the YouTube for DeniseHeadley.com. Yeah, make a donation. I like free wings and chips and a Miranda and a bit of Bitcoin if you're feeling overly generous. And please do donate and follow me as well. I'm on X and I'm also on YouTube under DeniseHeadley.com. So let's dive right straight into your article on Substack. Now, recently, the comedian and well-known, I think he's also he's involved in theatre, Lenny Henry, he wrote
and he's
a book.
Brummie. He's a compatriot of my city.
Oh,
Yeah,
fabulous!
I'm from Birmingham too. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I mean, he's probably one of Birmingham's more famous sons, and I'm talking contemporary wise. Okay.
Yeah.
He recently wrote a book and he talked about the question of reparations. And we're coming up to the end of Black History Month. It's really important, hugely interesting that we've got all this celestial activity happening in and around Black History Month. No, I just link those two in there. But the point is, it's coming up to the end of Black History Month, and I wanted you to just give me some thoughts about what you think about the debate, because one of the things that he said was that reparations, firstly, should be looked at and acknowledged, but also should be paid to people. And I think that in itself, it had the usual, what I would call scratch response, which is, oh my God, we're talking about questions of race and repatriation of wealth. So therefore, we're going to respond poorly. But essentially other questions are there. So tell me what your thoughts about the media response was, and also about what Lenny Henry's saying.
Media response to Lenny Henry's book was predictable,
Yeah.
entirely predictable. And so it was just a way of exaggerating what he was saying and dismissing it so that you can shut down the conversation quite quickly by making out that in a decontextualized way that everything that he's saying about it is irrelevant. I don't have a copy of Lenny Henry's book yet because it's really quite recent. So I won't comment so much on the book itself because I need to actually read it before I comment on it. But
Ideally, that's what
um,
you would expect, but you know.
but some people feel qualified to comment without reading books these days.
Precisely.
Yeah, but in terms of the wider discussion about reparations, for a lot of people in Britain, I think that without context, it's very hard to understand the case for reparations. But if we sort of focus in on the main focus of the media coverage, which was, kind of general pearl clutching behavior around the idea of giving individual people reparation, which is not the usual way in which people suggest that reparation should be done. So, and we'll come back to that. If you remember that the in after 1833, when slavery was largely abolished across the British colonies in Britain, it compensation was paid, as you know, not to the enslaved, but to the enslavers.
Mhm.
And that at the time took around, I think, a third of Britain's GDP. So it was a lot of money. So in order to pay that out, the British government had to take out a massive loan, which we only finished paying off in 2015, many, many, many years later. When it comes to the idea that individuals should be compensated, there is some merit to with this compensation scheme alone, in arguing that, because people of African and Caribbean descent have all this time been paying back until 2015, been paying back the loan which was taken out to compensate the people who enslaved our ancestors.
I mean,
Now,
if you
that's
think
very
about that,
insulting.
well, if
Yeah,
you
I mean,
applied
that's
that
just
to
wow.
other groups who have government support because of the treatment that they've had, you will see that that's probably fairly unique to the
Mm,
Africans diaspora.
yeah. When it comes to reparations more broadly, I think it's difficult to make the case for reparations not outside Britain, where the debate is moved on and progressed and is quite deep and broad, but within Britain, it's quite narrow and reactionary. But that's partly because, as a general public, our knowledge and understanding about not just the slave trade, but the entire slavery system is quite thin. And that
I don't
means
think
that
it's
it's
just,
very hard to understand, what not just what that history was, but how the terrible impact it had on the Caribbean islands, being, which were basically held back from economic and industrial development just to supply European countries with the commodities like tobacco and sugar produced by enslaved labor.
well, we've just got enslavement via debt instead. There's no change. It's just interest rates now. And the system has remained the same. But what I wanted to just jump on that question is about understanding, because our education system and our historical accounts only uses the winners of the experience, hence the reason why our island stories is such an important piece of work, because it comes from the perspective of the enslaved people. And this other piece of work that you've done in relation to the National Trust buildings and their historical links, those contexts are not there. So, like you said, people respond in a reactionary way. They don't understand that there wouldn't have been an industrial revolution if there hadn't been a program of effectively deindustrializing other countries. And we're not in that space where we can have that conversation because invariably you get people such as, not being funny, your average what can I call them? Very colonial minded individuals on the mainstream and legacy media, and they're given the space. And then if you do have a black face there, they're often the outlier, or they're there to, ensure that the angry black woman or the angry black man is there. We can't have any emotions about it because, we don't do emotions, dear. So I think that's the half of the problem. The problem is the education system and the history, and we're not really, people aren't interested in contextualization. They just want, oh, this is the media cycle. Lenny Henry talks about reparations, and then we have things, well, why don't we compensate the Romans? You get those stupid kind of vacuous responses.
Yeah, what we call those false historical analogies.
Oh, that's a nice way.
The thing about reparations is that it's not like it's a new call. One of the arguments about reparations against talking about reparations is the idea that, well, it was so long ago now, you can't compensate them after all this time. But the issue is that this is not a new call. The call for reparations has been going on for a long, long, long time. It's just that they were consistently ignored and dismissed and denied. And it's only now that those Caribbean voices calling for reparations are a lot more audible to the British public, especially after the royal visit, with
That's what
Kate
I was
and
gonna
William.
say.
Yeah, it became more audible. So I think that there needs to be more work done to just ensure that everybody understands the direct and indirect legacies of slavery. So one of the legacies which I talk about in my book is a very, very personal issue, which is family history, your ability to access and know your family history.
Mm.
And one of the people I walked with, Graham Campbell, he's of Jamaican heritage, but as we know, there are many, many Jamaican Campbells because of the Scottish enslavers who, were involved with slavery in places like Jamaica. And because of the way that the plantation records were kept, it means it's very hard for anyone of African and Caribbean descent, especially Caribbean descent, to trace what happened to their ancestors and to know their own family trees. That's massive. That is a massive personal consequence. Another one, which is mentioned by CARICOM, which is a group of Caribbean nations, is a medical legacy in the incidence of diabetes among people of Caribbean descent. It's very, very high, and it's connected to the change of diet and other environmental factors connected to the slavery system, the
Oh,
consumption of sugar, and
and
so on.
starch and things like
Um,
that.
yeah, and that is actually passed on genetically from generation to generation, like some horrible medical baton. That so part of the call for reparations is, could we please address the diabetes epidemic?
Or
Can
could we
we
just
have
have an
money
understanding?
to address it? Well, first of all, even understand the connection.
Yeah, because I think
That
that's where we're in a difficult place. Look, you're not being funny. The people who are going to look at this piece of work that we're putting together aren't the people who really need to look at this piece of work. The people who need to have access to these types of conversations, and this understanding, it's that group of people. How do you penetrate that group? Because to me, that group is the largest group. They're the most pervasive. There's access to even speaking with them. You can't even get into the media, and when you do get into the media, it's a bit of a pantomime and a charade. So, there's no printed press. So when you think about what you're saying in terms of, well, we need to move on in this direction, well, how realistic is even that?
I don't think it's realistic at the moment. I think there's so much, there's a lot of work to be done, but I think a lot of work has been done just in the last 5 years. I would say that there has been a shift in public understanding, and there's a deepening of general knowledge about empire, colonialism, slavery. Thanks to some very high profile projects, the Legacies of British Slave Ownership, which came way before the National Trust report on its houses' connections to empire. English Heritage done some major work, other heritage organisations, and a lot of projects, grassroots projects about figures like Dido Bell, which was done by a local history group.
Colson in
Looking at
Bristol.
Colston. So there are several landmark pieces of work or events which have raised people's understanding of those of that history. And I think there's loads and loads and loads of history teachers that I work with and my colleagues work with and
Yeah.
have been working with for years to really incorporate the complexities and nuances of these histories into the curriculum. And so there is a lot of really good work being done.
I think,
And I think it
oh,
just
sorry.
takes time. It will take time. And I mean, people talk about decolonisation and all that, but I think decolonisation, if that were ever possible, is aspects of it are just the work of generations. It's not going to happen overnight. It's
No.
all just slowly,
Yes.
just continue the work until people reach a different understanding of their own history and they can begin to see British history from the outside, not just from the inside.
I think we have a tendency to mythologize and canonize our what we see as great deeds, but those great deeds are never contextualized within the context of the people who needed to support them or the people who were sacrificed so that those great deeds and those great deed makers could be mythologized. And I think that's part of the mystique of this whole question. And I think one of the biggest, I think, catalysts, and you might not agree with me here, for the not the push at a governmental level for reparations, but an understanding of the I would call the wider community. I think it's Harry and Meghan. I think when Harry and Meghan decided to leave the royal family and go back to America, that was a huge turning point for everybody, and all the eyes were very much then on the royal family, and they are a pivotal recipient of the beneficiaries of colonialism, slavery, and their continued wealth and the structure of our country. So I think their current from what I can see, they're being demoted by virtue of some of their associations, and I'm being kind here, some of their associations and, their family members, as they go down the public's estimation, questions about their legitimacy, I think, is going to become more and more potent. And the questions around their role in the slave trade, because let's not forget, how many of those previous countries where they still are heads of state, where they still essentially have land rights, how many of them are saying, we no longer want to have you as head of state. We no longer want you to be within our constitution. I think the last one, I think, was it Grenada? I can't remember. They haven't changed the constitution. He's still head of state, but they've done a
Barbados,
separation.
certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done a separation exercise. So I think the spotlight on the royal family globally is creating more interest in the questions of reparations. Well, I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, my thoughts really are that the royal family, although they did employ a researcher to look into their family's connection to slavery, but meanwhile, other historians have been on the case and have discovered a number of royal connections, direct connections to slavery and
Mm.
plantation ownership, including Queen Elizabeth and now King Charles, are both directly descended from a plantation owner. And there are other discoveries which have been made by people like Desiree Baptiste. She's done some good work on the royal family and many others. So we do know what the slavery connections are. And of course, they had early connections to direct connections through the Duke of York and
And what about the East
through,
India Dock Company and
the
all of that?
yeah to the Royal African Company, which
Yeah,
was a slaving business, and
yeah.
then yeah, you're right, East India Company and all of that. So the family, the royal family, has umbilical connections to empire. They were the ones that gave the charters to the East India Company and the Royal African Company. So and benefited personally in many cases from colonial wealth and the influx of colonial profits. So the thing about royal family is that they have an opportunity there to use their platform to promote the education about empire and slavery, especially slavery. And they're not using that platform at the moment, but I think that one of the ways that they could gesture towards acknowledging and beginning to repair that history is through what Catherine Hawes calls a historical reparation. So historical reparation is the kind of work that the Legacies of British Slave Ownership Project did, or on a lesser scale, my own books and books of other colleagues about which are all about these histories. So I think that, yeah, I mean, Meghan and Harry, I mean, the thing is that you've got this taking sides thing, which has happened post, once they've left the royal family, and the questions about race, racial identity, it really came to the fore.
Yeah.
And the mysterious royal who we never know, who said what was said about the baby, Meghan's baby
Yeah.
and Harry's baby. But I think, it's a drama in and of itself. It's a focus for the discussion, but I think that it's really important to think through how we can have informed evidence-based discussions about this issue, and also to understand some of the other legacies, like racism itself as a legacy of empire. If you have 400 years or more of dominating nations on a basis that the colonized people are supposedly in need of civilization and are
Well, they need to be saved,
savages or
saved
less
from
than you,
themselves.
lower than you in the hierarchy, it's going to have an impact on the mentality, on the ways in which white people view their their fellow Britons even.
Well, talking about that, at the weekend, there were two comments made by a member of a political party. And he spoke, I think, and there was a question there about whether or not the statement was even racist, because he said he went to a town and he didn't see anyone that looked like him. And then I think one of his colleagues, who's potentially being touted as a leader of said party, said that people need to, who are not culturally coherent. I thought that was a really interesting use of language. Culturally coherent. They are, that was deemed to be racist. And there was not a reaction in the press like you would have had maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So that speaks to normalization of a particular type of thinking. And also it speaks to, in my opinion, the movement of the political parties to embrace racism as a policy agenda so much more fervently, because let's face it, everyone's there bar the Greens and the Workers' Party, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, are you talking about the visit to my city in Birmingham
Well, I didn't
or
want
is
to.
that a
It's
different?
Robert Jenrick, basically.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
came and he said,
Well,
"There's no, sorry, I didn't see anyone that looked like me." And I think the only
yeah.
thing available was possibly, I don't know, an onion bhaji, and he wanted a bacon bap.
Well, obviously, I wrote when Robert Jenrick came to Handsworth to film something, I think for GB News about rubbish, very insultingly, and which has a subliminal idea about race, which is really objectionable. He spent, I think, 90 minutes there, and he
Yeah.
purported to have not seen any other white people there. Well, I did write a Substack piece about that as well,
Okay.
because um, that's my city, and that hurts, when someone comes and it does such an outrageous thing and says such an
It was a
outrageous thing.
political stunt,
It was a
Corin.
stunt, and it was a bid. I think it's like you. I agree. It was probably a bid for the leadership, because Kemi Badenoch is stumbling somewhat and floundering somewhat, and as leader of the Tory party. But so the thing about Handsworth is, of course, the great Benjamin Zephaniah came from Handsworth, and he's written many poems about how he is the embodiment of Handsworth. Everything he learned was from that place. And of course, Handsworth, if you look at the demographic, yeah, of course, there are lots of white people living there, and they're all very comfortable living there. Thank you very much. And it is one of Britain's most diverse and most integrated, culturally integrated, super diverse places. It's a very exciting place to be. It's somewhat neglected by the authorities, but it is a wonderful, dynamic, a very creative place to be. If you look at Robert Jenrick's hometown and his constituency, two different parts of the country, if you look at their demographic data from the last census, you'll find that his constituency and his hometown are between 96 and 98% identifying as white. Now,
What are they?
that
Where are they
does
though?
not reflect the demographic in Britain. So he is the one that needs integrating, and those societies are the ones that need integrating, not Handsworth. And
Where is he the MP for, please? Can you remind me?
he's in Nottinghamshire
And what is
somewhere.
his hometown?
It's called I think, in down south. I've got it on my Substack.
Oh, cool. The
Um,
reason I'm
I
saying
looked
that
it
is
up.
the reason I wanted to pick up on what that is because, oh my God, it says the meeting's going to end in 10 minutes. So if it's okay with you, I've still got
Yeah.
like 40 minutes. So I'm just going to bang another quick one on, yeah, when it cuts off, yeah. But I've got to wait for it to upload and save as well. So it might be like, go and get a quick cup of tea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got. I'm just looking at my Hansworth thing. His constituencies. Um. Are he Newark and Sherwood. So it that identifies as 96.3% white, which is not typical of the
No.
country.
And I think the reason why Robert Jenrick is trying to occupy that space is because he knows that there is a real appetite in this country for people to agree with him. And that just goes to speaks to the endemic racism that I think is present in our community because it's part of our education system, our history, and our understanding of the world. So it's no point saying that it's not in our minds because that's where it is. And I think what he wants to do is he wants to be able to, you know, demonstrate that this is the worst type of society that we could possibly have. I mean, think about it. If you wanted to have a question and address questions of rubbish or fly tipping, you could have gone to any city, okay? Because most local authorities now have contracted out their refuse collection and therefore they've cut the services. Most people don't even have a regular weekly collection anymore. It's twice monthly and for some people once a month, depending on what they're collecting. So the question is not about looking at the real issue of, you know, people's impact of public services. It's to show that we're really worried about the black and brown people. You know what I'm saying? Run for the hills, Jemima. The savages are coming, and don't forget to buy us.
Well, I mean, we have to remember this was, something for GB News, which has
One of
got
the
in
most
trouble
widely
before
watched
now.
channels on all of the legacy media channels is taken over from BBC, Sky, and ITV. So the
Yeah,
point
well,
is
that's
they're
that's
all,
part of
they've
the
got an
problem, isn't
audience.
it? Yeah, they've got an audience. I always find it rather strange because when you look at it to see what they're doing, it's just incredibly dull. It's just people being angry all the time. It's loads of glitches. There's loads of it's just this really unprofessional outfit. And I just don't get how that could be entertaining or interesting or stimulating in any way. I mean, the other thing is that
It's
um
news entertainment, Corin. When I was at LBC, that's how the news is described. News entertainment. So you know you're watching a show. So therefore, it's got characters. There's always a
yeah.
villain about.
Characters and caricatures, should we say?
100%.
I mean, that's the other issue that I think if you're going to have a healthy democracy and a healthy media, the media needs to be able to hold politicians to account. That's what the media is supposed to
No,
do.
they just go around like
But
a
they
revolving
can't hold
door.
them to account if the politicians are the journalists and
Yeah,
they've got their
thank
own
you.
media shows.
Thank you, girlfriend. The point is, we have a revolving door in our political classes, okay? Don't get me started on the Tony Blair Institute, okay? Please don't. Yeah, because, they're taking over our public services. They've signed a memorandum of understanding with the government. Anyway, that's for another. Have a look at my other work. But essentially, it's a revolving door of the same type of people in the same spaces. And our national politics in Europe reflects that it's well. I mean, the ex-Bank of England chair is he's running Canada now. Yeah.
Well,
Moving along swiftly, darling, let me just jump straight
yes.
all over the questions of economic legacies. And I think one of the things that I found interesting in your article, you made reference to Pardner. And a lot of people don't understand
Oh,
the
yeah.
history of Pardner and why it was
Mm.
a very important way of addressing inequity. And it was an innovative solution. So maybe you want to maybe just share a little bit about that and how that links in with questions around economic legacies of racism and slavery.
Yeah, I mean, I think I only know about this through a brilliant exhibition that was done. Obviously, I'd heard of it before, but it was a brilliant exhibition in the Bank of England, which was curated by Museum And. They're a mother-daughter team, and they're the first museum of Caribbean Heritage Museum in the country, and they are
Wow.
based in Nottinghamshire. They're really good. They do great exhibitions, and they were. That whole exhibition was about the fact that when the Windrush generation came to Britain, because there was all kinds of discrimination against them, and it was almost impossible to get a bank account. So if you wanted to save money, you had to find an alternative economic system. And so the way that that system works is that everyone pays in
Yeah,
some
we
money
all throw a
to a
hand. I know about
trusted
it because I've done it, of
trusted. You
course.
know more than me.
Yeah, because we
Of
use
course,
it.
yeah.
We use it.
Because it's still in operation, and
It
so
is.
everyone,
Yeah,
there's a trusted person who's like the banker, and they collect all the money, and then you pay into it, and when it's your turn, you get the money out, and that's this
absolutely.
an alternative economic system that's sprung up to deal with the discrimination and exclusion by the Bank of England, and but obviously. There are all kinds of consequences to that. That's just a very creative way of dealing with discrimination and being shut out of the existing banking systems. But I think it's really fascinating that it's still such a strong thing, and also
It's anti-usury
when
as well. You don't have to pay interest on it. So that
yeah,
basically
exactly,
means that you don't borrow money on top of the money. So it's actually very good for people who have small money because there's no
yeah.
interest attached.
Yeah, it's perfect for bypassing all of those problems. And but it's also the fact that when that exhibition was on, the Bank of England was saying, "Oh, we're so proud to be hosting this exhibition." But what they didn't say is, "We're really sorry
It's going to
that
cut off in
we."
5 seconds. We're really sorry, and we're going to come straight back after this.
Ta-da!
Is it cutting off or what?
No, it doesn't seem to be cutting
Oh, it
off.
says 253. Oh, it's giving me another another 2-3 minutes. Sorry, go on.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, just to finish that thought, instead of the Bank of England saying, offering a formal apology for
Oh
the,
no. We gave
exclusion.
you some cabinets instead. Put your stuff in
Yeah,
there.
they're basically celebrating the fact that they've got this exhibition about partner system in their bank. But even so, it's good that the exhibition was held, and I think it was really informative to a lot of people who didn't know about it.
Well, the two things that I wanted to say about partner, I have used, well, we don't call it partner because my people are from Guyana. We call it
Right.
box, and we
Mm.
all throw box. And the thing about the box is that you throw a hand, and there could be maybe 6 people in it, 4, 5, 100 people, depending on your circle, and you get that money. And it's based on everyone just dropping in the money every week and not missing a hand. Some people pay up front, some people don't. And it's a very good system. And when Margaret Thatcher came in, yeah, I don't want to miss this point. When Margaret Thatcher came in, the largest home owning community in London were African Caribbeans because we couldn't go to the banks. And one of the first shops I remember going in and my people telling me we could go to regular shops, but you wouldn't get credit. One of the only shops that used to give credit to my community was John Lewis's. John Lewis's, now most people know it as Waitrose. No, when my people came to this country, they could go to John Lewis's, open an account, and take stuff on credit. So ratings to you, John Lewis, wherever you are. Total ratings.
Amazing. Well, I think, yeah, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah,
That's
John Lewis
just
in Holloway
what a
Road was
story.
one of the few shops that when my cab people came here in the 50s, you could go to John Lewis and they would let you open an account and you could pay for things on account. We used to go there back in the day because they used to have the place where you can have tea and cakes. And my mum used to take us there on a Saturday. We'd have the lovely little sandwiches and then
Oh,
teapots. And my
yeah.
dad used to like all that fancy tea, Darjeeling,
Doilies?
Lapsu
Did you have
Sung,
doilies?
doilies, the whole thing. The little sugar things where you pick it up with the pincer
Oh,
hands.
nice.
Oh, I used to
Yeah.
love all of that. So we used to go there. We used to get our school shoes, our school uniforms. You could take things like housing, like good, like large ticket items, and they gave credit. And back then, my actual aunt worked in there. This was going back, but this is a long time. But even before then, you as a black Caribbean person could go to John Lewis in the 60s and they'd give you an account.
That's amazing. Wow, how interesting. Yeah, that's